Thanks for joining me on episode 499 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Fraser Rice, author of Wealth Actually. I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the right relationship with all of your gifts is the key to doing this. One way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend Scott Mader.
I reframed the frustration and the emotion and the problem and the situation, and I found something from it that I could take away that actually was positive. And notice that I turned it into an action. I did something. I learned something from it, and then I put that action into practice. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world. In today's episode about investing in yourself through stewarding your talent, I talk with you about what the problem really is when you have a problem, the difference between positive thinking and reframing problems, and why reframing is a key to failing forward. You've heard me talk about developing your talent, and one of the best ways to do that is through books. But if you're like most people today, it's hard to find the time to read. And that's why today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to inspiredstewardship.com/audible to sign up, and you can get a 30-day free trial. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can pick one and listen your way to developing your talents via Audible. That's inspiredstewardship.com/audible to get your free trial and listen to great books the same way you're listening to this podcast. Do you have problems? I mean, really, do you have problems? And of course, the answer to that question is pretty much for everyone at some level, yes. We all have things that go wrong in our lives. We all have challenges that we face, and all the positive thinking where we reframe and we talk about opportunities instead of challenges. You get told that a lot in the business world, where it's not a problem. It's an opportunity that comes along, and that's how you need to think about everything. And truth is, there's a lot of truth to that. That's part of what we're going to talk about in this episode, is this idea of what is the real problem when you have a problem. The truth is, when we have a problem, when something's going wrong in our life, when we aren't getting where we need to go, when things are not going well, is the problem the thing that's not going well? Or is the problem the way that we think about the problem? Because often it's really not the problem that's the problem. It's the problem that's behind the problem. The problem is our reaction, our attitude, our action that we take in response to the problem. The problem sometimes isn't the problem, it's the problem behind the problem. Now, before you go too far, one of the things that immediately comes to mind when I start saying that is a lot of the positive thinking material that's out there. The idea that, just think positive, buck up, little buckaroo, everything will be better tomorrow. The problems that come along are really just opportunities in disguise. So you should cheer whenever a problem comes along, because that's just a new opportunity for you to succeed. If you just think positive, everything will work out in the end. You've heard it. You've probably even done it. You've done the affirmation exercises. You've sat down and thought all the positive thoughts in the hopes that it would change your world, and nothing happened at all. But there's a different way of looking at it. Sometimes it's not about just thinking positive. It's not about just thinking that things are going to get better. It's not about just dreaming the results and letting your brain visualize success. Instead, it's actually about reframing. Reframing is a little different than just positive thinking. This isn't about just looking at the world and saying things should be better. It's not looking at the world and saying, it really shouldn't be this hard. It's not looking at the world and saying everything's going wrong with my world and going down the route of making everything permanent, pervasive, and personal. Maybe I'm cursed. And repeating these thoughts. So it's neither visualizing positive or negative. Instead, reframing is about shifting your thinking about the situation. It's about looking at the situation from a different point of view. It helps us change the emotional tone and meaning of what's going on. We can actually reframe from a problem to a challenge, but to do it, it's not just about thinking positively. It's not just about saying, hooray, I've got a problem. It's about actively taking on the role of pausing and reflecting and reviewing, recognizing the emotion, calling it out, saying, yes, this makes me angry. Yes, this makes me frustrated. Yes, this makes me afraid. Yes, this hurts me. You need to acknowledge those feelings. If it's something that another person did, acknowledge that the other person made you frustrated. Acknowledge that you're feeling the emotion of frustration because of the action that they've taken. But then look at the situation and begin to think instead, what is the lesson I can learn from this? What is the thing that I need to take away from it? What's going on in this situation that isn't necessarily a positive, but is at least something that I can take away as a lesson? One of the interesting experiences I had back in the day when I was a school teacher, and this is a minor thing, but it was a really big thing, is right before school started, we'd always have 2 or 3 days of what they called in-service. And inevitably, some group from outside would come in and they'd lecture us for several hours about some topic that really didn't help us become better teachers. And we were all frustrated and tired and angry because we had things that we'd rather be doing that we felt were more important. And I used to be frustrated as well. And then one day I thought to myself, wait a minute, I'm somebody who instructs children. If nothing else, I can sit through this lesson and I can learn from it how not to engage my students. I can pay attention to what I should not do because it's disengaging the audience here. Odds are good it'll cause my students to get disengaged. And I began to take away from these bad in-services nuggets that made me a better teacher. I reframed the frustration and the emotion and the problem and the situation, and I found something from it that I could take away that actually was positive. And notice that I turned it into an action. I did something. I learned something from it, and then I put that action into practice. That's why reframing is one of those tools that can be a key to actually failing forward. See, the truth is that when we make mistakes, when we have problems, when we have challenges, when things go wrong, often it's out of those things that come the opportunities for success. It's why I talk all the time about running experiments and trying things out, because as you run these experiments, as you try them out, that's what allows you to begin to succeed. So reframing becomes a key part of the process of being able to allow yourself to make mistakes, to have problems, to have these challenges that later lead to success. So what problems do you have today, and how can you reframe them so that you can take a positive action and begin to fail forward? Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of talent, you can go over to inspiredstewardship.com/talent and sign up for our 5-week series on the stewardship of talent. Or if you're in the U.S., you can text 44222 talent tips. That's talent tips to 44222 and get those tips. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.